When avoidants regret their breakup decision. You ever make a decision that felt right at the moment, only to look back and think, what the hell was I thinking? We've all been there. Maybe you thought walking away was freedom. Maybe you thought you were protecting yourself, or maybe you convinced yourself that love wasn't meant for you. But now, here you are, looking back, feeling that weight in your chest, regret, the sting of knowing you let something powerful slip away. When we operate from fear of vulnerability, fear of commitment, fear of getting hurt, we make decisions that are based on escape, not growth. The avoidant mindset is wired to push away deep connection because it triggers a survival instinct. But guess what? Survival is not the same as living. You can run all you want, but sooner or later you realize love is not a prison, it's the key. Ever hear that voice in your head saying, I didn't really need them, or I was better off alone? That's the ego talking. That's the armor you put on to protect yourself from feeling. But the truth? The body knows, the heart knows, and when the dust settles, that void inside isn't just loneliness. It's the absence of something real that you pushed away. Regret is not the enemy. Regret is the teacher. If you're feeling it, it means there's a lesson you need to learn. So ask yourself, was this breakup truly aligned with your highest self, or was it a reaction to fear? Growth isn't about never making mistakes. It's about recognizing them fast enough to change your course before it's too late. Most people run from the past because they're ashamed of it. But let me tell you, real strength isn't in never falling. It's in having the courage to admit when you were wrong. If you walked away and now see that decision differently, own it. No more pretending, no more excuses. Ask yourself, what do I need to do right now to honor my truth? That may mean reaching out. It may mean making peace, or it may mean choosing never to make the same mistake again. Life will always give you two choices, growth or fear. Avoidants choose fear because it feels safer, but safety is the slow death of passion, love, and fulfillment. The pain of regret will either paralyze you or propel you. So what's it going to be? Will you sit in the what ifs, or will you break the cycle and step into the version of you that's capable of real, deep, lasting love? I challenge you today to face that regret, to feel it fully, and to use it as fuel to grow, because love isn't meant to be run from, it's meant to be mastered. Now, go make it happen. When we make decisions from a place of fear, we often convince ourselves they are rational choices, but in reality, they are emotional reactions disguised as logic. Avoidants tend to believe that walking away from deep emotional connections is the best course of action because staying feels suffocating, overwhelming, or even threatening. The truth is, avoidance is not a conscious, well-thought-out decision. It's a deeply ingrained defense mechanism designed to minimize emotional discomfort. From an early age, many avoidants learn that vulnerability is dangerous. Maybe they grew up in an environment where emotional needs weren't met, where love was inconsistent, or expressing emotions led to pain rather than support. Over time, they develop a coping mechanism. When relationships start to demand emotional closeness, they pull away to protect themselves. The brain wires itself to see intimacy as a potential threat rather than a source of connection and fulfillment. And so when they find themselves in a relationship that feels too deep, too real, or too intimate, their instinct is to run. They convince themselves that they are better off alone, that their partner was asking for too much, or that they just weren't ready. At the moment of breaking up, this feels like control. It feels like taking charge of one's own needs and maintaining independence. But what avoidants often don't realize is that their decision isn't coming from a place of clarity. It's coming from fear. The fear of being needed, the fear of being seen, the fear of getting hurt. They push their partner away not because they don't care, but because caring feels too risky. And so they justify their actions by focusing on their partner's flaws, on the minor annoyances, on the idea that they're just not the relationship type. They tell themselves a story that makes it easier to walk away. But here's where the real challenge begins. After some time has passed, when the immediate relief of escape fades, the truth starts creeping in. They begin to realize that the very thing they ran from was actually something they deeply wanted. The partner they left behind, the one they convinced themselves they didn't need, was actually someone who saw them, understood them, and valued them in a way they may never find again. They begin to question whether their decision was really about incompatibility or if it was just another cycle of avoidance. And this realization, when it comes, is powerful. Regret doesn't stem from the loss itself. It comes from recognizing that the loss was self-inflicted. When an avoidant regrets a breakup, it's not just about missing their ex, it's about realizing they let fear dictate their life. The brain, which once told them leaving was the right choice, now whispers, "What if I was wrong?" And that thought can be paralyzing. This is where the turning point happens. Some will double down on their avoidance, burying their feelings and moving on as if nothing happened. Others, however, will start to question their patterns. They will look back and see that this isn't the first time they pulled away from love. They will recognize that their so-called rational decisions are actually the result of emotional wounds they never addressed. And if they're willing to be honest with themselves, they will see that avoidance is not freedom, it's a cage. The mind tricks us into thinking that pushing people away will bring peace, but what it actually brings is loneliness wrapped in the illusion of independence. True freedom is not the ability to run from connection. It's the ability to stay, to face discomfort, and to grow through it. Avoidants who regret their breakup have an opportunity in front of them. They can either continue the cycle or finally break free from the patterns that have held them back for years. The decision is theirs. The mind is a powerful thing. It has the ability to shape our reality, justify our choices, and even protect us from pain, sometimes at the cost of truth. Avoidants in particular are masters at self-deception when it comes to relationships. They create narratives that support their decisions, often without realizing that these stories are built on fear rather than fact. After a breakup, the avoidant mind kicks into overdrive, constructing a logical explanation for why leaving was the right choice. I never really needed them. They were too demanding. I wasn't ready for a relationship. It was only a matter of time before things fell apart. These are the lies that keep regret at bay, at least for a while. At first, these beliefs bring relief. They validate the decision to walk away and reinforce the idea that independence is the ultimate goal. Avoidants take pride in their ability to move on quickly, to remain unaffected, to keep their emotions under control. They convince themselves that they are better off without the emotional weight of a deep relationship. And for a time, this works. They stay busy, dive into work, distract themselves with hobbies, and avoid any thoughts that might make them question their decision. But here's the thing about self-deception. It only lasts as long as reality allows, because no matter how much someone tries to bury their feelings, the body knows. The heart knows. The mind may be able to construct a convincing argument, but deep down, there's an undeniable truth. The loss of a meaningful connection is not something that can be easily dismissed. Eventually, when the distractions fade, when the noise quiets down, and when solitude stops feeling like freedom, the truth begins to surface, and that truth is often painful. The emotions that were suppressed start creeping back in. The moments that were once ignored begin to replay in their mind. The laughter, the deep conversations, the feeling of being understood in a way that was rare and irreplaceable. At first, they may brush these thoughts aside, reinforcing their belief that missing someone doesn't mean they made the wrong decision. But over time, something shifts. The emotional detachment they once relied on starts to weaken. The cold logic that justified the breakup no longer holds up against the undeniable feeling of loss. It is in this moment that regret begins to take form, not necessarily regret in the sense of wanting to go back immediately, but regret in the realization that they may have acted out of fear rather than clarity, that maybe they didn't leave because the relationship was wrong, but because closeness felt too overwhelming, that maybe they weren't being smothered, but were being truly seen for the first time, and that scared them. This is the internal battle that avoidants face. They don't want to admit that they miss someone, because to do so would mean acknowledging that their belief system, one that has protected them for so long, might be flawed. It would mean confronting the possibility that they weren't in control, that their decision wasn't entirely rational, and that their so-called independence is actually a wall they built out of fear. And so they are left with a choice: continue clinging to the lie, burying their emotions deeper and repeating the same cycle in the next relationship, or face the truth. Facing the truth is uncomfortable. It requires vulnerability, self-reflection, and a willingness to acknowledge past mistakes. But it is also the first step toward breaking free from avoidance, toward understanding that love is not a threat, but an opportunity. The greatest regret isn't losing someone, it's realizing too late that they were never the problem. The problem was the story they told themselves to justify pushing them away. Regret is one of the most powerful emotions a person can experience. It has the ability to haunt, to paralyze, and to keep people trapped in the past. But regret is not the enemy. In fact, regret is a signal, an opportunity to grow, to reflect, and to make different choices moving forward. For avoidants who have walked away from relationships and later found themselves questioning their decision, regret is not a punishment. It is a wake-up call. It is life's way of saying, pay attention. There's something here you need to learn. When an avoidant first ends a relationship, they often feel a sense of relief. The space they longed for, the emotional demands they struggled with, the discomfort of closeness, it all disappears. In their mind, they have escaped a situation that felt overwhelming. They convince themselves that breaking up was the right move, that they are better off alone, and that their independence is what truly matters. This belief provides a temporary sense of control. But then time passes, the intensity of the moment fades, and the emotions they suppressed begin to resurface. They find themselves thinking about the person they left behind, not just in passing, but in ways that tug at them unexpectedly. A song, a place, a random memory suddenly brings a wave of feelings they thought they had shut off, and in that moment they begin to wonder, did I make a mistake? At first, they may fight this feeling. They may try to rationalize it away, telling themselves that missing someone doesn't mean they should have stayed. But the deeper truth is that regret is not just about missing a person. It's about realizing that a choice was made based on fear rather than true clarity. It's about recognizing that the discomfort they felt in the relationship wasn't necessarily because it was wrong, but because it was challenging them in a way they weren't ready to face. And that realization can be hard to sit with. This is where the real opportunity lies. Regret is not just an emotion, it is information. It is showing them something about themselves that they might have ignored for years. If they listen to it, if they lean into it instead of running from it, they have the chance to break a cycle that has kept them from deep, meaningful connections. Instead of viewing regret as something to be avoided, they can begin to see it as a call to action. They can ask themselves, what is this feeling trying to teach me? Maybe it's showing them that they need to work on their fear of intimacy. Maybe it's revealing that they tend to sabotage relationships when they start getting too close. Maybe it's a sign that they need to have an honest conversation with the person they left, whether that means seeking closure or opening the door to reconciliation. Whatever the lesson, the key is to act on it. Avoidants often get stuck in patterns of avoidance, not just in relationships, but in dealing with emotions altogether. They push things down, distract themselves, and pretend they don't care. But the truth is, ignoring regret does not make it go away. It only delays the lesson they are meant to learn. The people who experience the deepest regret are not the ones who make mistakes. It's the ones who refuse to learn from them. Mistakes are inevitable. No one moves through life without making choices they later question. But the difference between those who grow and those who stay stuck is their willingness to listen to what regret is telling them. Regret is only painful when it is ignored. When it is faced head-on, it becomes one of the greatest tools for transformation. It forces people to confront their patterns, to recognize their fears, and to make a conscious decision to do better. And for an avoidant, that choice can mean the difference between repeating the same cycle or finally allowing themselves to experience the kind of connection they have always secretly longed for. Owning your truth is one of the hardest but most liberating things a person can do. It requires self-awareness, courage, and a willingness to face parts of yourself that you've spent years avoiding. For someone with avoidant tendencies, admitting that they made a mistake, especially in a relationship, is not easy. Avoidants have spent much of their lives building an identity around independence, self-sufficiency, and emotional control. They take pride in being able to walk away from situations that feel overwhelming, believing that their detachment is a sign of strength. But what happens when that detachment starts to feel less like power and more like a prison? What happens when the space they once craved turns into loneliness? What happens when they begin to realize that the person they left behind wasn't suffocating them, but was actually offering them something they deeply wanted, but were too afraid to accept? This is where owning the truth becomes essential. When an avoidant starts to feel regret, their instinct is often to suppress it. They tell themselves they made the right decision, even when a small voice inside whispers otherwise. They distract themselves, throw themselves into work or hobbies, or seek out shallow connections to prove that they're fine. But deep down, they know the truth. They walked away not because the relationship was wrong, but because it forced them to face parts of themselves they weren't ready to deal with. Owning that truth means letting go of the justifications and defenses. It means sitting with the discomfort of realizing that their fear of intimacy, their need for control, and their tendency to push people away have cost them something real. It means admitting that the person they left wasn't the problem, their own emotional barriers were. That kind of honesty is painful, but it's also the first step toward real change. Most people avoid admitting when they are wrong because they confuse it with weakness. But true strength isn't about never making mistakes. It's about recognizing them before they define you. Avoidants who regret their breakup have a choice. They can either double down on their old patterns, convincing themselves that they're fine and moving on without addressing the real issue, or they can take responsibility for their actions and learn from them. Taking responsibility doesn't necessarily mean trying to fix the relationship. Sometimes the breakup was the right decision, but the way it happened, the reasons behind it, or the lessons it revealed still need to be acknowledged. Maybe it means reaching out to apologize, not because they expect to get back together, but because they know they handled things in a way that wasn't fair to their partner. Maybe it means finally seeking to understand why they run from love, so they don't repeat the same cycle in their next relationship. Owning your truth is powerful because it allows you to reclaim your choices. Instead of being controlled by unconscious fears and patterns, you start making decisions from a place of awareness. You stop running, stop making excuses, and start living in alignment with what you truly want. And that's the real freedom, because as long as you're avoiding your emotions, you're not actually in control. When an avoidant owns their truth, something shifts. The walls they built don't need to come down all at once, but cracks start to form. They begin to see that love isn't about losing yourself, that closeness isn't a trap, and that the people who truly care about them aren't trying to control them, they're trying to connect. And connection, despite what their fears have told them, is not the enemy. It's the thing that makes life meaningful. Life is always presenting two choices, growth or fear. In every decision, every relationship, every challenge is an opportunity to either step forward into a greater version of yourself or retreat into the comfort of what's familiar. For avoidants who regret their breakup, this choice becomes even more significant. They can either face their emotions, examine their patterns, and take responsibility for their actions, or they can continue down the same path of avoidance, convincing themselves that detachment is the only way to stay safe. Fear is deceptive. It disguises itself as logic, as self-protection, as independence. It tells you that pulling away is the right decision, that getting too close will only lead to pain, that you're better off alone. And for a while, this belief brings comfort. Avoidants often feel relieved after leaving a relationship because it gives them space. It removes the discomfort of emotional closeness, the pressure of vulnerability, and the fear of dependence. It reinforces the illusion that they are in control. But growth operates on a different level. Growth doesn't care about comfort, it cares about transformation. It demands that you look at your own behavior, challenge your own narratives, and recognize where your fear is holding you back. Growth requires brutal honesty. It forces you to ask yourself, did I really leave because this relationship wasn't right? Or did I leave because I was scared? Was my partner truly too much? Or was I unwilling to open up? Do I actually feel free now, or am I just numbing myself from the pain of loss? Avoidants who feel regret after a breakup are experiencing the pull of growth. That regret is not just sadness, it's an invitation. It's a sign that something deeper needs to be addressed. But here's the hard truth. Regret alone is useless if it doesn't lead to change. You can regret a breakup for years, replaying the past over and over in your head, wishing you had done things differently. But without action, without self-examination, without a willingness to choose differently next time, regret becomes nothing more than a cycle of suffering. The choice to grow is not easy because growth requires vulnerability. It means facing emotions that have been buried for years. It means acknowledging that independence is not the same as emotional health. It means admitting that pushing people away has never truly made you happy, only temporarily relieved your discomfort. And most of all, it means letting go of the belief that love is something to fear. Choosing growth might mean reaching out to the person you left, not to rekindle the relationship necessarily, but to own your part in what happened. It might mean seeking therapy or personal development work to understand why you've been running from love. It might mean allowing yourself to grieve the loss of a relationship instead of pretending you don't care. And in future relationships, it means making different choices, staying in the discomfort of intimacy instead of shutting down, expressing your needs instead of assuming you're better off alone, and recognizing that true freedom isn't about avoiding connection, but learning how to navigate it in a healthy way. Fear keeps you stuck. It keeps you living the same patterns, making the same mistakes, and wondering why nothing ever changes. Growth, on the other hand, is the path to something new, something deeper, more fulfilling, and more aligned with the life you truly want. If you find yourself regretting a breakup, ask yourself, am I going to let this regret define me, or am I going to use it to transform me? Because at the end of the day, the real choice is not about the past. It's about who you are becoming. Regret is not the enemy, it's a teacher. It shows us where we've been, where we've made choices out of fear instead of love, and where we have the opportunity to grow. Avoidants who regret their breakup often come to realize that their decisions weren't made from clarity, but from deeply ingrained patterns designed to keep them safe. But real safety doesn't come from pushing people away. It comes from learning how to navigate intimacy, how to trust, and how to stay open even when it feels uncomfortable. The past does not have to define the future. Every moment is a chance to choose differently, to choose growth over fear, connection over isolation, and truth over self-deception. Regret is not meant to keep you stuck. It's meant to wake you up. It's a reminder that love, real love, is not something to run from. It's something to embrace, even when it asks more of you than you're used to giving. Because on the other side of that challenge is something greater than fear. It's freedom, the kind of freedom that doesn't come from being alone, but from knowing that you are capable of love, of connection, and of building something real. Thank you to everyone who took the time to listen, reflect, and open themselves up to this conversation. Growth is not easy, but it is always worth it. If you see yourself in these words, if you've ever struggled with running from love or regretting a decision you made from fear, know that you are not alone. The past may have shaped you, but it does not have to define you. I appreciate each and every one of you for showing up today with an open heart and an open mind. The first step to change is awareness, and you've already taken that step by being here. Keep pushing yourself, keep choosing growth, and most of all, keep choosing love. Thank you.